Congratulations, SCP Explain fans, you've just scored yourselves front row seats to the freak show. Hey, don't be so nervous. I know clowns don't necessarily have the best rep these days. Thank you very much, John Wayne Gacy and Stephen King. But I guarantee you, I'm not like the other clowns at Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting. I'm as human as you are. Well, okay, that's potentially debatable depending on how stingy you are with your definitions of what exactly counts, but we'll get into that later. See, I'm what they call an anomalous humanoid, known to the eggheads who work for Miss SCP Foundation as SCP-2094, Object Class Euclid, whatever the heck that means. My friends call me Barney, on account of the fact that's my government name, but if you're a fan of the circus, you probably know me better by my stage name, Motormouth. Pretty fitting nickname, ain't it? I tried to make Barney the Bottomless happen in the early days of my career, but it wasn't catchy enough to stick. Then one day, my buddy Quincy threatened to barf a swarm of bees on my face if I didn't shut my motor mouth, and that's been my stage name ever since. Now that we're properly introduced, you're probably wondering what cool tricks I have up my sleeve to get me that nifty SCP designation. Well, it's not because of my heightened manual dexterity, my juggling skills, my accordion playing prowess, or even my nearly perfect impression of Jane Fonda as Barbarella. So if you guess any of those, you're way off base. See, I'm the subject of a quote-unquote spatial anomaly, accessible through my mouth and my throat. In plain English, I've got a second stomach. Anything I swallow disappears into a pocket dimension made of anomalously elastic intestinal tissue, where it's stored until I need it again. If there's a limit to how much I can store in there, I haven't found it yet. The amount of stuff in there has no effect on my overall weight or my ability to move. Once it's in there, it's just kinda gone until I want it back. On top of that, my lower jaw can be stretched up to 6 feet. That's 2 meters for those of you weirdos who use the metric system, in any direction. So, in addition to being a juggler and a clown, I also made a killing as a geek at Herman Fuller's Circus. I don't mean geek as in owned a signed James T. Kirk Funko Pop that's still in mint condition. I mean the sense of somebody who gets paid to eat weird junk as a form of performance, although I have been accused by some of being both. Now you're probably thinking, Motormouth, my pal, my good buddy, there's so many careers you could have got into with that very specific set of skills. Garbage disposal, one-man moving van service, left luggage attendant at Grand Central Station. Sky's the limit, man. Well, sure, but I love the circus. They're the only family I've ever got in this world. I came to them when I was just a wide-eyed punk kid of 8 years old, and they took me in like I was their own flesh and blood. Yeah, believe it or not, I wasn't actually born into the circus life. A lot of circus and performing arts folks are born into the industry. Born in a costume trunk, as they say. But unfortunately, that's not me. I was born in New York City on April 10th, 1976. My dad had took off long before I showed up, leaving me in the care of my dear old mom. My special abilities manifested early, and my mom recognized them right away. You know how little kids are always putting things in their mouths, right? It's cute when it's a block or an action figure, but less so when it's the entire coffee table. Yeah, my mom was fully aware of what I could do, and she hated my guts for it. Not only had her baby daddy flown the coop, but the kid she was raising was a freak of nature who she could barely stand to look at. And trust me, the feelings of resentment were totally mutual. One of my favorite pastimes as a youngster was to go out and find as many small animals as I could, get my little hands on, then go back inside where Mom was laid out on the parlor chair sleeping off one of her special grown-up headaches she got from downing a bottle and a half of her special grown-up juice. I made like I was gonna innocently ask her a question, smiling one of those adorable little 8-year-old smiles, then instead of saying anything, I just barf up a couple dozen rats onto her lap. Despite how much I hated living at home, it never occurred to me that I could leave. I was a pretty wide-eyed kid. Mom kept me isolated from the wider world. I guess out of fear that I'd eat somebody. But one night, as I was going to bed, I met Manny. Who's Manny? Pfft, come on! If you know anything about the Circus of Disquieting, then you know Manny. Don't you guys already have a video on that? Manny's short for the man with the upside-down face. He was Herman Fuller's right hand, in charge of a lot of the backstage stuff, including, shall we say, talent acquisition. Who knows how he figured out where I was, or that I could even do what I do, but just like magic, he showed up at my window. Should I have been worried that a man with an upside-down face was at my window? Probably. But I guess I was just happy to see someone who was more of a freak than me. Manny offered me a place in a real family, where I wouldn't be cooped up. He said that freaks belonged out in the world, sharing their talents, making people laugh and cry and puke all over the place. I didn't hesitate. I took him up on his offer. Mommy Dearest was so deep in the drink that she didn't even notice I left. And that was that. From that day forward, I was a member of Herman Fuller's family. I never looked back, not even once. Now, it may also surprise you to know that I wasn't always the picture of confidence I am today. My first job with the circus was as the human clown car. As a kid, I didn't have a lot of stage presence, and I didn't talk much, so the natural thing to do was to send me out to the ring and let the clown troupe come marching out of my mouth, to the surprise and delight of the audience. I learned juggling from a guy named Scythe. He was a human pincushion, but like most of us at Herman Fuller, his abilities were way beyond what you'd see at any common or garden circus. Scythe was incredible at what he did. You could stick a shiv in every square inch of this guy and he'd never bat an eye. Total jerk though, and awful with kids, so how he got the job of training me in the ways of the juggler is totally beyond me. If I so much as talked out a turn, he'd beam me in the head with a juggling pin. Not hard, just enough to hurt. I know, that sounds bad, but at least it toughened me up. I think Scythe was jealous of me in hindsight. I was a natural, and I think he saw me as, some kind of threat. Scythe eventually died and the fire stunt gone wrong. I held a funeral for him, but I was busy that day. Clowning I learned from a guy called Scruffy McGrubbins. Good old Scruffy. He had all the grace and countenance of a chain-smoking grizzly bear, and he was worth more than all the grandmothers I never had. He never talked to me like I was stupid, the way most people talk to kids. Scruffy took me seriously, and he imparted unto me all the knowledge he'd picked up in his years in the circus trade. He was a very wise man, as clowns go. He never minced words, never messed around with small talk. He just jumped straight into a conversation and expected you to catch up. I never knew what happened to the guy. I already quit the clown biz and settled down in a nice apartment in Kent. I hope he's having a good day wherever he is. So I did the juggling thing for a while, tossing around balls and pins and other junk and catching it in my mouth. Sometimes I'd put a plant in the audience, call them up, and swallow them whole as a part of the act. Eventually, I started working on a double act with another freak by the name of Theo. See, Theo could flip himself inside out, but he was also a pretty skilled acrobat. So he'd do a high dive jump over the audience, pull his insides outside, then aim himself down my gullet. It was a pretty great act, if I do say so myself. Theo and I even dated for a while. What can I say? I find guys just as fun to swallow as gals. But after he and I broke it off, I decided I needed to change up my act. That's when it hit me. Motormouth. Picture this. Here's me, an assistant on either side, ready to pull my mouth open. Then a Chrysler comes barreling into a big top, hits a ramp, drives right into my mouth, into my second stomach. It was a dangerous act, a magic sure, but not immune to being run over. But it was the best act I ever came up with. I could tell you some stories about my time with the circus. There was this one time my tapeworm started talking to me. The time I was involved in overthrowing Herman Fuller himself and installing Icky as a new ringmaster. The time I hooked up with one of the non-human capital C clowns. So this is a family-friendly channel, so maybe not that one. That's not what you want to hear though, is it? You'd rather hear about how I got myself captured and locked up by the Miss SCP Foundation. Alright, why not? I've already spilled the rest of my backstory. So Manny, you remember Manny from earlier, right? He saved a lot of kids like me, and when he did, he usually put me in charge of teaching them how to perform. But there was this one girl he brought in who broke down crying in the middle of one of our juggling lessons. She said she wanted to go home. And that's when I knew that Manny had graduated from saving runaways and abused kids like me to abducting kids with powers. Of course, I confronted him about it. I told him point blank that's not how we do things anymore. Herman hadn't been around for years at this point. We were better than that. He gave me some garbage about him doing what he had to do to keep the circus alive. Can you believe that? Even with everything we were doing, he still thought the circus was on the verge of collapse. So I took the girl home, stored her in my gut, and snuck her onto the kaleidoscope. That's the machine we used to move all the parts of the circus from place to place. The kid was back with her parents before dinner, but when I returned to the circus, Manny was furious. In hindsight, I think it nearly killed him to do it, but he said he had to make an example of me. So, he threw me in a box, locked it with chains, and painted the words 4SC on the top. I was left out in the field in Kamifurano, Japan like a wrapped present for Miss SCP. And that's how I ended up in containment. Truth be told, I've slept in prisons more comfortable than this place. The beds are hard, the food is gross, and the little red light on the security camera keeps me up at night. Not ideal conditions for a circus superstar of my caliber. But as my old pal Gordy Lantern Skull used to say, it's the performer that makes the stage. Now, go check out Trapped in a Game SCP-1733 Season Opener and SCP-426 I Am a Toaster for more of the downright weirdest anomalies out there. And while you're here, try and get me out.